Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast where Bobby Marks, we had a trade. We're 16 days away from the trade deadline and the Lakers and the Wizards. Oh my God, a barn burner. This is going to turn everything around for the Lakers. Rui Hachimura, disgruntled tweener forward in the last year of his rookie deal, former number 9 pick. The latest, or the not quite the latest, but one of a long line of disappointing Wizards draft picks between like 8 and 16 in the last year of his rookie deal, dealt to the Lakers for Kendrick Nunn. Would-be savior Kendrick Nunn, much hyped. Like, this is the guy. We've been waiting on this guy, Kendrick Nunn, and 3 second-round picks. And here's where we find ourselves, Bobby. I looked at the Western Conference standings this morning, and you know intuitively, like, it's jam-packed. Oh, my God. Seeds 5 to 13. So that's 9 teams. There are only 15 teams in the conference. Seeds 5 to 13, which I believe is Dallas to Portland right now, all have either 23, 24, or 25 losses, which means any of them can finish anywhere from 5 to 13, including the Lakers, who just will not die. Every time there's a trade like this, only Wizards fans, 18 of them, and sick people like you and I are actually watching the Washington Wizards. The rest of the people who are normal NBA fans only maybe watch the Wizards if their team's playing the Wizards, if even that, but they've heard of Rui Hachimura. They know he's a top 10 pick. He's world famous. And so when a trade like this happens, the reaction is instantly like, what a steal for the Lakers. That's all the Wizards could get for Rui Hachimura. What a disgrace. Contract the franchise. That's it. I think all of that is slightly wrong-headed, but what was your initial reaction to this, other than let's for now forestall the what does this mean for the Lakers cap space off-season plans, which I think is quite interesting. What did you think of the trade on its own?
I thought that I think we made too much into the Lakers first round picks that we talked about ad nauseum, 27 and 29. I just felt that if there was going to be a deal, that it was going to involve seconds, because they had 7, including one of them is the Chicago second that went back to Chicago. Ironically, 2 of those picks were part of the Westbrook trade, right? So basically came back like full circle here. The Chicago one, and then the 2028, which is like the less favorable of the Wizards or the Lakers here.
Well, between Beal rumors and Kuzma rumors that never stop, it's like, and Thomas Bryant and Troy Brown Jr., it's kind of like they've just become one franchise at this point in all the interchangeable parts. Like, how far would that franchise get in the playoffs if you just combine the teams? It'd be a pretty damn good team. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I a couple thoughts. I mean, everyone was looking at it like, well, he's a former lottery pick. Why couldn't you have gotten the first? And I say, well, he couldn't stay on the court. You look at his games played, right? I mean, whether it be, he was out last year for, whether it be personal reasons, he had an ankle this year. His shooting numbers are down. I know his last game was that 30-point game against Orlando, but I think he was like 33% off catch and shoot threes this year. I want to say, I think it was a little bit higher, 47 last year. I think what it signals is that they're willing to spend on Kyle Kuzma.
Wizards.
As far the Wizards are,
and likely that they think Kyle Kuzma will be receptive to them spending on him instead of lose him for nothing.
I think he was the big winner. He was probably one of the big winners yesterday, was Kyle Kuzma, that you basically traded a guy who was going to be a restricted free agent. I mean, you could have held on to them as an insurance policy in case the Kuzma price tag was going to be too high. But so I get it from the Wizards perspective as far as moving off. I just think, and I'll get to the Lakers in a minute. I mean, I guess I'm a little bit disappointed where, like, the track record of drafting is not good in Washington. It's not good at all. I mean, besides Bradley Beal, it's not good. And eventually you're going to need one of these players to give, 2 of these guys to hit, unless you just want to be a 35-36 win team. I mean, that's the kind of the reality of it from the Wizards perspective. For the Lakers, I think there's a lot of multiple ways we can look at it here. You get a 4. So basically, I mean, but when AD comes back, you put AD back at the 5, right? Thomas Bryant's been really good. I mean, really good.
He's been good enough. And I wrote about this before the season. I think they need to explore 8 minutes a game of the two of them together, because Thomas Bryant can shoot it well enough. I mean, he had the one bubble year where he shot the hell out of it from 3, and then he had injuries and the shooting fell off. If that bubble year was anything like real, there is a world where the two of them can play together. I don't think you want to do that given how great AD has been as the only center on the floor, but he's been good enough that you got to explore that.
Yeah, I mean, and it gives you, something they've lacked is bigs. There was a glut of guards there. None goes out. You still have those 2 first here. I think it's a matter of like kind of then what's next now, right? Like what's going to be the next move, because as you mentioned, he's a restricted free agent here. Woj said yesterday that there's the intent to re-sign him when he becomes a free agent. I know in talking, in the offseason, I guess in October, I thought that there was a point where they were close to an extension with the Wizards, in that $12 million number.
There was. I think it came down to the wire. I think like 13, 14, 12, something in there, and Hachimura wouldn't take it. And by the way, that given where the mid-level is, like that's a totally reasonable decision for him.
Yeah, the mid-level isn't $7 or $8 million anymore. I mean, eventually it's going to be like 11 million. So it's close to that here. So I think you look at what the Lakers have done over the last, whether it be the Memphis game or the Portland game, and I think they think internally like we have a legit shot to crack the top 6. And you mentioned where the standings are. They've got the Clippers coming up here. But what I'm interested in now is are one of those first in play now, right? Are one of those first in play, is Westbrook in play? Because let's face it, if your goal is to bring Hachimura or sign Rui in the offseason, so you're either going to act as a team with cap space, or you're going to take a direction right now where we want to target players that are under contract under 2023, 24, or have their bird rights, and basically acquire 3 or 4 players instead of going into the free agent game.
Yeah, the Lakers are 2.5 games and 2 in the loss column out of 5th. That's it. That's nothing. Like it's not nothing given just how many teams there are, but it's not much. And they have been playing all year long. You got to give them credit for as much of a show as they were for the first 15 games of the year. Are they going to start 0-7? Oh my God, whatever. Like they never stopped competing. That's a credit to the players. It's a credit to Darvin Ham. They compete every game. Like even the other end against Portland, they fall behind 71-46. The Blazers are laughing it up. The crowd's taunting them. They come out and they're like, we can win the game. Like we can still win. We're not rolling over. And it's just not AD out. Reeves has been out. Walker's been out. Like those are 2 of their best perimeter players. And I do think I just want to talk for a second about LeBron, because as he approaches the scoring record, a lot of the analysis on LeBron is like big picture, retrospective. He, for the millionth time, is the first person at his age to do X. It's remarkable what he's doing at his age. You look at his career in total, all the records he's going to break, and he's about to break the most hallowed one probably in the sport. And I do think it's getting a little overlooked, the fact that he's still amazing. Like he's still amazing. And for a while, I think it was overlooked because the Lakers were losing. And some of the games they lost had the feel of like, he'd just get the ball on the left block and be like, you know what? I'm going to kind of pivot and take a couple fadeaways here just to see if I get some buckets and low stakes. And I'll pull up from 3 a couple times because why not? I don't feel like going to the rim. This game's not worth it. Like there are stakes now. And here are the numbers. This is since Anthony Davis got hurt on December 16th, I think. The Lakers since then, with LeBron on the floor, are plus 99. With LeBron off the floor, they are minus 114. That is crazy town. The plus 99 is a big number. It means that his play is still winning play against teams that are trying to win, like good teams. I mean, everyone in the West every night is like, it's like a freaking playoff game. And their starting lineup right now, you could argue Dennis Schroeder, Patrick Beverley, LeBron, Thomas Bryant. Who am I forgetting? I don't know. Somebody else.
They've been going a little Toscano Anderson too, right?
Yeah, they've had JTA. Yeah. It's you could argue it's 4 backups and LeBron, and they're still winning these minutes. And so I like this deal for them. Rui is in the last. I wrote this in 10 things either last week or the week before. The last month has been the best stretch of Rui Hachimura's career. He can score. Now, the fit is going to be interesting because, as you said, the 3-point shooting has been mostly mediocre for his career, with the exception of last season when he didn't play very much, but shot very well. LeBron's going to make all those looks easier, right? He's going to have to make them. What he's really wanted to do in his career is take long twos off the dribble and out of post-ups against switches. There's going to be less room for him to do that with the Lakers. He's going to have to make threes. He's also been an empty calories scorer for most of his career. He's like Allen Houston power forward. Remember Allen Houston? I'm not saying that Allen Houston was not an empty calorie scorer, but he was the king of like 22, 1-1 box score lines, 22, 2-2. That's Rui. He's an awful passer. He's a bad rebounder. His defense sort of lacks feel, and his best position is the 4, which is also LeBron's best position on defense. So they're going to have to figure all that out, but there's talent there, and it's a good buy low for the Lakers. And for the Wizards, as you pointed out, like, I understand that people clown the Wizards. You mentioned, do you just want to be a 35, 36 win team? They might just want to be a 35 or 36 win team that maybe one year wins 45 and gets to the second round and is competitive. If they lock into Kuzma and Porzingis in the offseason, that's what they're going to be. But they're still run by basketball people. If there were a first round pick to be had for Rui Hachimura, they would have the first round pick today. There was no first round pick. The rest of the league has watched Rui Hachimura put up 12 0-0 lines and play bad defense. Like, that's just what it is. So I think it's a fair deal for both teams. It's disappointing for the Wizards because they need to turn those picks into real players, as you said, and they didn't. And they didn't turn Rui into a player who's going to help their team going forward. But I think it's a good deal. I think it's a good deal for both teams. And whether Rui starts or comes off the bench, and I know there's reporting that they plan to start him. Okay, we'll see. It's worth a shot. Like Rui, LeBron, AD, and 2 guards. That's worth a look.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, and I was asked yesterday on radio in Washington that could they have just waited until we got closer to February 9th? And I said, well, basically Kendrick Nunn in 3 seconds would have went somewhere else, right? If it wasn't Hachimura, it would have been somewhere else, and that was basically the best deal. I think when you have currency and second round picks, that's more used in a trade like we saw yesterday here, and I think there is a little bit of, somewhat of a sense of urgency to get something more accomplished now than wait 2 weeks, and that's what they did.
Yeah, there's a lot of the Wizards screwed up faction will be like, second round picks don't matter. Who cares about second round picks? And the Wizards do have a long track record of selling or punting on second round picks. That's been less the case in recent years. But, Jordan Clarkson, for instance, was a Wizards second round pick to tie up the 2 franchises again. But at the same token, the Lakers just got Rui Hachimura with second round picks. So if you love the deal for the Lakers and hate the deal for the Wizards, you can't hold those 2 diametrically opposed views of the worth of second round picks. Can I throw a fake Russell Westbrook and first round picks trade at you? Let me put on my Bill Simmons hat and ask you, who says no?
Okay.
Zach LaVine for Russell Westbrook and both first round picks. Let's say one is unprotected and the second one has the most limited possible protections that are allowable under NBA rules, which are whatever. I don't have the bandwidth to look them up right now.
I would love to have ask this question in the off season, but I can't because Westbrook's a free agent. And I would love to go one more run with this group in the playoffs if they get in the play-in, I guess. I would do it. I would seriously consider if I was Chicago. And I think my intent would be then now what's your direction, or now what do you do with DeMar and Nick? But I think two unprotected ones for I mean, that I'm just, between him and Beal, man, I don't think it's going to be pretty on the back end of those contracts here.
Well, I don't think Beal is even a conversation right now.
No, it isn't
for anybody, and specifically for that package. Is it
Beal,
no for Washington?
Beal's not a conversation, Zach, just because like the no trade, man, like the no trade has it carries a lot of weight, man. Like if let's just throw out a hypothetical here. Let's say Toronto just came and offered Masai offered 4 firsts to Tommy Shepard. Right, great. I want to do it. Well, Bradley Beal just can veto, right? It's like the baseball players. Like they have 4 teams where they want to go to here. So I don't think Beal's a conversation right now here. But for me with Zach, I would probably consider it because I don't see this roster, although they had a good win against Atlanta, I guess, at home. I don't see it getting into that top 4, top 5. I think there has to be some type of pivot here with this group.
Here's my gut, because this is one of the few Russ plus both picks trades that is still, even in theory, kind of viable. And I stress in theory because I'm going to make the argument for why Chicago wouldn't do it in a second. My gut is the Lakers would do it because that's their free agency in one fell swoop. It would come with some pretty painful tax implications. That's a big, big contract. And this is not a franchise that spends like the Clippers or, the Warriors or whatever. It would give them a playmaker. And I think Russ's ascension as their 6th man has shown that they need playmaking. And Anthony Davis in particular needs someone to set him up on the second unit. And LeBron needs another playmaker. Although Dennis Schroeder has been quietly fantastic for them in the starting 5 lately. I think my gut is the Lakers do it. Here's the argument for why Chicago should do it. And I'm not saying they should, but if you think they should, this is the argument. We won't take that big of the numbers and the evidence say we will not take that much of an on-court step back if DeMar DeRozan stays healthy. If DeMar DeRozan gets injured, we're screwed. That's probably the case anyway. Vucevic has played very, very well for the last month. We can probably flip this contract of an all-star, a 2-time all-star, Zach LaVine, that is, I think, has 4 years and $180 million left on it after this year. He's had knee issues. He looks like himself again, explosive-wise, but you just never know. Teams are wary. We get 2 first-round picks for that. That's good business for us. We're off that contract. On the court, maybe we don't get that much worse. The case against it is, A, we really like Zach LaVine. He's the main guy we got in the Butler trade way back when. He's very good, shooting the hell out of it again this season, playing better and better as the year goes on. The Bulls are also quietly 11-6 in their last 17 games. Their next 3 games are Pacers, Charlotte, Orlando. Now, the Bulls have crapped the bed against bad teams all season. If they take care of business against those teams, they will be 25-24, 1 game over 500. Exactly where I think if you told them a month ago they would have been that when they were 11-18, they would be thrilled. They'd be right in the play-in, playoff, outside shot at the 6 seed race. So I don't think they would do it. I don't think they would do it, but I do think that's a deal that they should consider if it were ever proffered to them. By the way, I asked you to make your 12-man all-star rosters. Did DeMar make your
yes.
Eastern Conference all-star team?
He was my 12th guy. He was the
12th guy.
He was the final wild card. Yes. I had trouble with it. Both teams.
I gotta write my all-star column.
I think with and you're making really good points here. I think if you were Chicago and this was a year from now and they just finished a year where they lost in the play-in and they're 25-24 right now, right? Same group, then I think yes, right? I think it's more of a like, guys, where are we going here, right? I just think it's a little bit too fresh, right? Just year one. Um, let's see where this group, is there another, are we the Boston of last year, right? Can we get into the, can we get to 6? I don't think so.
Miami,
You gotta get to Miami.
Miami's
Yeah.
built a little separation there now and
Yeah.
is getting healthy.
But yeah, I just think I mean, I would look at it, but I think it's a little bit too, as I said, a little too fresh, where if it was a year from now, I would think I would be probably more considerate.
I guess Miami has actually not built much separation. They're only a game ahead of the Knicks, who have lost 4 in a row, and they're 2 games ahead of the Hawks, who have lost 2 in a row after a nice 5-game winning streak. They kind of quelled some of the Hawksy melodrama that's been going on there. But it just feels like Miami is set to kind of stabilize as a good team that wins, 3 out of every 5 games. It just sort of crawls up toward locking in 6th. And, 5 is going to be tough. They're only 3 games out of Cleveland. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The other thing with Chicago is it makes you older, right? It makes you older. Although Levine's not young anymore. He's younger than the other 2 all-stars on their team. And it kind of like, now I have to re-sign Vucevic. I got to re-sign Vucevic. It decreases my leverage a little bit with him. Just the opposite of the Wizards kind of increase their leverage in trading Kuzma. Like now, if you want Kuzma, you have to come with a big offer. It may have hurt their leverage re-signing Kuzma, but it helped their leverage in trading Kuzma. I just think it's interesting. I also had DeMar on my Eastern Conference All-Star squad as either the second guard of the backups or one of the wild cards. I just think I'm not going to reveal the whole column now, in part because I still haven't made all my decisions. I just think he's played a ton of minutes. I just think he's a little bit more consistent as a scorer and a playmaker than either Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle. I have him over both of those guys. I don't know if either Nick is going to make my 12-man All-Star
I don't
team.
have him on there.
It's,
I don't have either
and
Knicks
people are
player.
just, people get
They're
so
having
outraged.
good years. They're having great. They're having.
It's hard, man. It's hard to make the All-Star team.
That's the thing. It's like, and it always drives me crazy when people say people get snubbed, and I always say, well, who's coming off, right? Like, if you're going to say snubbed, give me like who's coming off. Like, Halliburton has missed some games, but
has to be on it.
Yeah, you see his impact with him not on the roster. Leading the league in assists.
Perfect transition. Tyrese Halliburton has to be on it. In fact, the second guard spot for me in the starting lineup, and I have a ballot for the starters, came down to Halliburton and Jaylen Brown. Yeah. That's how good Halliburton has been despite his recent injury. The Pacers are 0-6 without Halliburton. They play, I believe, two of the next 3 nights. They have a bunch of games coming up. And that was my next question for you. They're now down to 23-25. They are 9th in the East. Tied now with the Bulls, actually, at the 9th and 10th spots. The Raptors are not climbing. The Raptors are clinging to life, but they're clinging to life just 2 games behind the Pacers, and they have a decision to make. The Wizards, who are tied with the Raptors, are coming for 10th, baby. Coming for 10th. Or the Wizards are accumulating some good play-in experience. They're going to become like the play-in.
Like Charlotte had accumulated that, right? It wasn't pretty.
Man, Charlotte is not fun to watch. I'll tell you, who is fun to watch? Mark Williams.
Yeah,
they finally put that dude in the rotation. He's good, man.
And it's so funny because I wrote that article in Wendy's column back in December. I basically just bludgeoned them about their draft history, and then all of a sudden, like, how it works. It's like the curse. Like the next day, Mark Williams played, and he had like 17 and 7. I was like, whoa, where did you come from? Thank God.
I watched them play the Rockets the other day. And again, that is Hornets Rockets is a sign that I have a lot of problems. And the Rockets announcers were like, oh my God, Mark Williams has blocked every single shot since he's been on the court. He never stops dunking. He had like 6 dunks in the game. I like Mark Williams. No, on Charlotte. We're not talking about Charlotte. Except to say, now that we're here on Charlotte, I think the intel I'm hearing, I'm wondering what you're hearing is, Rozier, Hayward, Oubre. Oubre's hurt now. Hayward, to me, I love Gordon Hayward. He's a great player. To me, as a trade candidate, as a buyer, I just have to write him off as a zero. He
I
just
can't
does. He
trust
just
him.
doesn't
I
play
can't
enough.
trust him.
He doesn't play
Can't
enough.
trust him.
And Rozier's not had a great year. The guy that I keep mentioning as someone I would try to get is PJ Washington. The intel I keep hearing now is I think that's quieted down, and they seem pretty determined to keep him in restricted free agency. Have you heard the same?
I have. I think the Bridges stuff also complicates a lot of things, right? Like what direction, because that went from, things were maybe both sides were negotiating, and then they came out like they were pretty adamant, like nothing is going on with Myles Bridges. The Hornets were. I think they even sent out like a press release or a statement regarding that to the Observer. So I think it's hard for them, to move off PJ, not knowing what's going to happen with Bridges. I think PJ is interesting just because, his number, from what I understand, what was offered was like in that 4 years, 52, 53 area.
Same with Hachimura, and they're not dissimilar players. I think PJ Washington's better, but similar number.
And we'll see if that's a little bit north. So I would say, that was he was in my fake trade, like to Golden State, right? Like
I remember that.
About that. So I would say probably less, the other guys you mentioned, I think that they're all up, Mason Plumlee's having a really good year.
It's funny you mentioned that because please, to the whole Plumlee family, I apologize for what I'm about to say. To all the Plumlees, Mason, Marshall, Myles, Mr. and Mrs. Plumlee. I don't know if there is a sisters, Plumlee sisters. I hate watching Mason Plumlee play. I hate it. I hate it. He's stiff. He's awkward. He's shooting jumpers lefty now, not just free throws. He shot a pick and pop lefty jumper the other day. I don't know why I'm even talking about this. I think I need to see a therapist for how much I hate watching Mason Plumlee play. And yet, Bobby, it's every game, 16, 12, and 5. Like I have to just say, I understand someone's got to put up numbers in Charlotte. Someone's got to get these numbers. He's been good this year. I don't know that I would like trade for him and be like, I'm going to play you 20 minutes as a backup center. But I need to get over my Mason Plumlee blind spot because he's been, I can't talk about this anymore. Pacers 23 and 25. The question that really matters is Halliburton's out a little bit longer. Let's say this swoon continues. We've all kind of buried the Turner healed for Russ and 2 first-round picks deal and pivoted to, is Turner going to sign an extension with Indiana? I don't think that deal doesn't seem to be alive to me still right now, despite this Pacers swoon. But I wonder, have you heard anything about if this feel-good season ends now, if they keep falling and all of a sudden they look up and they're like, "Whoa, we're 7th in the lottery standings"? Does this change their approach at all?
I think the realist there was that this probably wasn't sustainable as far as being in the top 6. Eventually, we're going to come back to earth a little bit here. Although, as you mentioned, you have to make a decision with Turner renegotiation. I wouldn't be, I'm interested to see if something gets done before the deadline or after. We've talked about $27 million in cap space. I don't think he's going to get, the full amount, which is you can boost it up to like 36, 37 million. So it's another 18 there. I don't see the Lakers coming back with a, Russ and 2 1s for those 2 guys right now. I'd be surprised, about that.
Especially the way Thomas Bryant is playing and how Anthony Davis needs to play center. Like that's been the obstacle all along to that deal.
Yeah. I mean, and then that's your kind of, you sacrifice those 2 and those are your 2 free agents. Basically, if you re-sign Turner and you have Hield for another year here, but you look at their roster, besides those 2 players, like I like TJ McConnell. He's having a good year and he's on a good contract, right? So there's not a pressing need to move off. But I think they're more of less upgrading their roster, which I thought we could have seen maybe with that Boston and that Cleveland pick, right? They've got Boston, Cleveland pick, or are they buyers with those two picks, right? Do we put those in play and see what you can get? But I think you're looking at more of like salary dumps, right? I think you're looking at, I mean, they've got 15 players, but you'd have to wait. I think they're more of like, I had put in there like, if Phoenix was looking to get off money, right? If, Saric, for an example, right? Saves them $30 million in tax. Like that's the type of deals I was looking at more from Indiana's perspective than some of these bigger names.
Phoenix has got to do something. They're 24-24. They've now won 3 in a row after a devastating stretch where they just didn't have bodies. Chris Paul is back. Booker will be back at some point, hopefully soon. Cam Johnson's back. They still don't have campaign. Ayton's missed a couple weeks. They're going to get healthy. It would be hard for them to pivot down the standings, given that what I've heard about this new incoming owner is that he does not want to do that. He wants to win. And obviously Chris Paul is 37 years old or 36, whatever he is, and needs to win. And if you have Chris Paul on your team being productive, and he's been pretty productive after a slow start, you need to win. And you mentioned all the Shamet, Saric contracts. They have a lot of movable contracts. And they just have this Crowder situation that, every week there's like, oh, there was almost this 7-team deal where Crowder went. It's always Milwaukee. And I think I was the first one to say at the beginning of the season, keep an eye on Milwaukee for Crowder. I think he fits there. I think they want him as the sort of PJ Tucker 2.0. I still think, if you ask me what team is Jay Crowder on in April, maybe it's the Globetrotters. I don't know. I would guess the Suns. I would guess the Bucks. I would guess the Bucks because I just think the interest is there. The Suns have to make a deal at some point. They have all their picks. They have all the swap rights. They were KD's team back when KD had a list. That list is gone for now. They got to do something, right? Is there any Suns buzz out there?
No, I mean, it's really Crowder. I mean, and it's like eventually time's going to run out, right? I mean, we're almost 2 weeks away here, and you're not going to get a first for him for a guy who hasn't played since the Dallas series here. I think if you're Phoenix, like I would be concerned. I mean, if I was Milwaukee, I would be concerned giving up like Pat Connaughton and George Hill.
But this Pat Connaughton thing, someone pitched this to me last week, an executive from another team. Hey, I heard the Bucks are going to trade Pat Connaughton for Jay Crowder. Like, is Pat Connaughton just better than Jay Crowder? Like, why am I doing that? I understand Jay Crowder's bigger, more switchable on defense. Like, Pat Connaughton's good. Like, why am I doing that?
And he's on a good contract,
a
good extension, and he's on a good. His extension doesn't even kick in yet. You get him for a few more 4 years. I just like that's for me. Like, if I'm Milwaukee, like, how am I getting there? Right? Like, how? I mean, it's probably George Hill and something else, but is it? I mean, I don't know if I want to give up Grayson Allen, right? Like,
well, that's why all these 3-team trades happen. Yeah. Someone told me that it has some interest in Crowder, that the Suns seem to want 2 of the following 3 things: a good young player, a first-round pick, and a rotation, almost a starter Crowder level player. 2 of those 3. And it's like, that's cool. Like, that's why Jay Crowder hasn't been traded yet, because we're 50 games into the season. He hasn't played. And he's in the last year of his contract. Like, the Heat have also been an obvious Crowder team. Yeah. They've had Jay Crowder. They like Jay Crowder. He yells at Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler yells at him. It all works. Everybody yells at each other. # Heat culture. Should they trade Caleb Martin for Jay Crowder? Caleb Martin's been pretty good. He's younger than Jay Crowder. He's on a good contract. Like, I think Jay Crowder's to the average NBA fan, Jay Crowder's a better player, a bigger name, and maybe he is a better player, certainly more rugged and playoff proven. Is that worth my while, though? The Heat are going to try to do something for sure. I don't know if that ends up being it, but like, that's not a no-brainer to me. I might not even do that if I were Miami.
Well, I think what's hurt too is that he hasn't played, right? I think if he would have been like, when PJ Tucker was traded from Houston to Milwaukee, he was on the court, right? He played, right? Like, so I think there would be more interest if he was out there competing and seeing where guy, like maybe it becomes maybe the 2 out of those 3 things on that Phoenix wish list gets checked off here. But I just think, his shooting numbers started to take a little bit of a dive. What type of role is he willing to accept? Is he willing to come off your bench for you? Like that's, for me, that's where I'm like, hey, I'll give you, an expiring and maybe a guy that's got another year and a second like that. That's probably more of the price tag.
Did you have either Bam Adebayo or Jimmy Butler on your 12-man Eastern Conference All-Star team?
I had Bam on my 12-man.
Not Butler.
I didn't have Butler. He's on like my reserve, my alternate list there.
I think Bam has to be a lock. I think he's just been too good. I understand Randall scores more points. Brunson is a little bit better of a playmaker. Bam's just better than those guys. Just better.
Well, he helped. I mean, when that thing was with injuries and guys, like basically had like 9 guys playing, like he basically kind of held that together for them.
What I had a hard time with picking my East reserves are, so in the West, you have 4 players who have played, 3 of them have played well south of 1,000 minutes, which is like nothing. Like you've barely participated in, not barely, but like that's just not a lot of minutes. If you haven't played 1,000 minutes and and they're still out, which means they're just going to end up missing more than half their team's games by the time the All-Star game comes around. And then there's another Devin Booker who's played just over 1,000 minutes. It's Devin Booker, Zion Williamson, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Anthony Davis.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And there's really no logic to putting one on and not putting all of them on your 12-man roster. Like if you put Zion on, Lakers fans have a real argument. Like, I don't understand, like 100 minutes. AD's played 100 fewer minutes and like that disqualifies him. Phoenix fans, wait, you put Zion on? Yeah, the Pelicans are good. They're 5 games over 500 now. They're not like great. And I realized they were much better with Zion, but we were much better with Devin Booker. He's not on. So it's hard to make a logical argument to include one, but not all 4, or maybe 3. In the East, you have 2 guys who have played like 5 more games than that and like 200 more minutes than that. So that's a significant, like somewhere in there is my line of demarcation. Like they've played like 35 games and 1,100 to 1,200 minutes. Like Jaren Jackson Jr. has played like 750 minutes. AD's at 830. Those 2 guys are James Harden and Jimmy Butler. And what makes them complicated is if you look at the numbers, and in particular, if you look at all the advanced metrics, all of them, they leap out as like, they have to be on your all-star team. Like their advanced numbers are so much better than everyone else's in this sample other than Halliburton and Giannis, who's, is someone in that front court of Embiid, Tatum, Durant. Giannis is going to have to come off the bench. Did you have Harden on?
No. Here's my issue, and he's played well. I mean, they're on a great run right now.
Harden has been under the radar.
I just have like, I mean, maybe I'm just biased. I just have this sour taste in my mouth from that Oklahoma City game. That home game where they lost, and his defense, Zach, might have been the worst I've ever seen anybody play. Like I just can't get it out of my mind how bad he was defensively here. And I know we have to look at the whole body of work here, but I mean, I think if I'm looking at the East guards, I had Drew Holiday on there.
He's either going to make it or be a very tough cut.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the Kyrie situation, he'll probably make it as a starter, right?
Yeah, I do it. I start from scratch. Kyrie's been incredible, and they've won these last 2 games without Durant, and he's been incredible in both of them. I just, maybe I'm getting old, but if your own team decides that you need to go away for a little while, I think you sit out my all-star team that year. If your own team is like, we don't want you around for a prolonged period of time. And it's nice that they've righted the ship. I just think you sit all-star, you sit out Utah this year. On my fake ballot, that doesn't really matter. It's not funny. Like, I'm not joking. Like, his own team was like, dude, you just gotta go away. Anyway, that's my Harden dilemma.
Let me ask you a question here. You got Damian Lillard on your all-star ballot, and I know that sounds like why would he ask that? But do you have Damian Lillard on there?
I do. I don't think it's a no-brainer, but I do think he needs to be on it. Let's talk about Portland.
Yeah.
Let's use that as a transition to talk about Portland. Yeah. They are down to 22-25. They finally won last night against the Spurs, who stink. That ended some amount of games losing streak that included that Lakers comeback. They are in the middle of a stretch where they play a whole bunch of home games. And going into that stretch, I think they felt very, very good about themselves. They were 500 or maybe one game under. They had a bunch of road games already in the bag. And here came this stretch, and it started with like Orlando, Cleveland. I think Cleveland was missing somebody for that game. That was a winnable game. Lakers at home, winnable game. And it hasn't gone well. And then you and I talked yesterday about the Damian Lillard post-game media availability after the Lakers game, when he was asked about the trade deadline and whether he wanted to see something, action of some kind. And he kind of, I think I couldn't quite understand why the question made him so angry. I think he felt like he was being baited maybe into saying something that was either going to that was just going to be maybe not reflect well on his current teammates or something. And he just didn't like the question. And it got the whole league sort of on notice about like, wait a second, is this something going wrong here? We both kicked around, checked in around the Blazers and stuff yesterday. What'd you hear?
Nothing. I think it's more of a player that's, I think the Laker game left a really sour taste in his mouth. And he even commented after they beat San Antonio by 20, like how hard it was to come to the gym with he's like, I still have that mind, that second half on my mind. I think he's looking at it like, I just want to play basketball. Stop asking me these questions. And it's really hard. What they've been trying to do there is that you basically kind of like retool on the fly. I mean, I've been writing about it. It's like extremely hard as far as what they're trying to accomplish. But I don't see anything from Lillard's standpoint. I mean, I think it's just hard with how the roster is that you're 67,000 below the luxury tax. You have basically no first round picks to trade because you owe Chicago a top 14 protected for basically like the next 6 years. Right. So it basically has to be 2 years.
That's a weird pick.
And that's the Larry Nance. That was the Larry Nance trade with Chicago and Cleveland and all that stuff. Their bench, it's been well documented. Bench has been bad. Right, bench is not.
It's been unhealthy. It's been injured, and now it's less so.
Yeah, you had Nasir Little out for a while. Justice Winslow's been out. Nurkic has not been good. And you got 4 years of him. I mean, that's a problem. At a $15-16 million number here. And then you've got the Jeremy Grant situation where, as we've talked about, that extension is still sitting there. $113 million for 4 years, could be a free agent this offseason. And if you sign him either to that or another number, like, you're locked in, man. Like, between Lillard, Simons, Grant, you're committing close to probably over $80-90 million in those, those three players.
They've become the team that I kind of thought they were before the season when I referred to them as meh, just vanilla and meh. And something is just not working. Offensively, it just doesn't feel like they know quite what their identity is on offense. Like, they don't want to be the Damian Lillard 70 pick and roll a game show that they used to be. All the pet kind of motion flex sets that Terry Stotts ran are not there anymore, but they run Damian off screens a lot, off the ball. It just doesn't quite seem like they know exactly what they want to do on offense. Their offense is fine, and when Dame's on the court, they're winning those minutes by a lot. And then defensively, it just feels like, Chauncey Billups has talked about how small they are across the board, and it's like, well, yeah, that's the team that you guys built. It's not,
and they were small last year when they had, that was the big complaint when they had Lillard, Simons, and Norman Powell. The three guards. It's like a under 6'3" lineup as far as with that.
And I just feel like we're living this same movie again, where the Lillard Simons backcourt is just never going to be able to defend. They're just never going to be able to have a good defense with those two guys at the top of it. And I just don't know what to do. Like you mentioned Nurkic. Nurkic has been wildly up and down this year. Had a huge game last night against the Spurs. Nurkic is whatever. He's fine. He's just an okay starting center. When people ask, how could the Blazers pivot if they decide to go into sell mode? Well, and Dame, there's I have not heard anything about Dame being anything. Like Dame's gonna be on the Blazers as far as I know. Could they trade Nurkic? I'm like, what? Does anyone want? I mean, Yusuf Nurkic is fine. He has 3 years and $55 million left on his contract, and he's like a old school starting center. Is anyone backing up the Brinks truck for that? Then it's like Josh Hart is a name that is very, very hot right now. A lot of teams would like Josh Hart. We mentioned Crowder from Miami. I think Miami will probably express some interest in Josh Hart. He's a heat kind of guy. And he has that weirdo contract where he's essentially probably going to be a free agent after this year.
Yeah, it's weird. It's got a player option. And if he picks it up and comes back, then the contract becomes non-guaranteed. So I think he'll probably become a free agent.
Well, Josh Hart is good despite his recent aversion to shooting threes, which seems to be abating. He's been shooting threes. Someone clearly spoke to him in the last week, like, dude, you got to shoot. He's good. And here's the world we live in, Bobby, and it's very different from the world you lived in when you worked in the league. Nobody cares about expiring contracts anymore. Expiring contracts used to be this golden ship of we can get picks and players. Nobody needs expiring contracts anymore. No one's cap sheet is clogged for the next 4 years. No one has a really good player on a long-term deal they need to get rid of. They don't have the same currency anymore. So Josh Hart on an expiring contract, what's the point of that for me? If I'm the Blazers, it's not like it's going to make my team appreciably worse. I'm not going to tank because I traded Josh Hart. I don't see what the point is.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. They don't have the currency like they did. I mean, we signed Chris Humphries to a 1 year, $12 million deal on an expiring because we thought it had value. Right. I mean, that's not the mindset anymore that teams have. And he's really kind of, if you break it down, I mean, Jeremy Grant, basically whoever, if they ever put him on the market, he's not going to be able to sign an extension. And then you're basically going to have to overpay him. I mean, that's usually the cardinal rule, right? When you give up so much for a player that you have to overpay to retain him here. And what does that do for Portland? That's it. So there's really no easy answer as far as what they can do, unless it becomes a point where you look at Simons, right? Does that break you up into two guys, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say. They're only if they want to retool, if they just conclude this roster is not good enough, we need to retool around Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard's our guy. He's 10 toes in. We're never trading him. He's going to be a Blazer for life. Their only avenues to do that are Grant and Simons. That's it. And Simons' thing is dangerous because he's so young. He's the bridge to your post Damian Lillard future. And Damian Lillard's in his early to mid 30s now, or whatever he is. I mean, I'll look it up later, but he's not young anymore, obviously. Trading Simons really kind of leaves you a little bit naked in the future. And Grant, okay, so say you trade Grant, you better nail that trade. You better get two good rotation players that really fit and a pick and something. And that's not easy with a guy that this summer is going to get paid a whole lot of money, probably by you. And if we're talking sign and trades or trades next year, trading him now on an expiring deal, that's tricky. I don't know what the avenue here going forward is, but I thought this was a 500 team coming into the season. It looks like a 500 team. It's an interesting 500 team. They've just started to reintegrate Gary Payton II. As you mentioned, Nasir Little just came back. It's an interesting team. And there's going to be a lot of noise around Josh Hart. And if they really kind of spiral the next 2 weeks, I think that may change their mindset a little bit, but I don't know what they could do.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's your guy, because then what you probably do is that we've seen a little more of Shaden Sharp, right? Kind of, from a minute standpoint. Now, does he, you basically go with him, Nasir Little, eventually we'll see Winslow back, but you're right. I mean, like the Payton thing is like, and that's the challenge when you're limited to what you can pay players, and you have, I'd love to go back and do a study on how many teams the mid-level or the tax mid-level exception it hasn't worked out, and Peyton's been injured, so it's hard to say. But like you go back in history here, and if you miss out on that, basically one of your own little tools to sign guys, that certainly hurts you.
Let's go back and talk about Toronto for a second, because our old colleague Chris Haynes is reporting that Fred VanVleet, something that I had heard last week and hadn't been able to nail down, has changed agents, which is always interesting when it's timed to someone's free agency. And it doesn't say who his new agent is going to be. I think I know who his new agent is going to be, but I haven't confirmed it yet. But either way, the Toronto thing, Toronto's 21-27. They're just not good. Like, they don't show signs of being good. Even when they win, you don't come out thinking,
it's funny too, though, Zach, is like when I look at their lineup, I like their lineup. I like their start, like when you just look at it before like when you like, I like it. But then when things,
you're talking to the idiot who's told people to take the over on 44.5 wins or whatever it was.
But then there's just something. Yeah. I've seen it. We've seen enough, right? There's enough body of work, I think, right, after 48 games to kind of, look at this group here because for the most part, I know Siakam was out, for a little bit, but for the most part, it's been, somewhat healthy. Fred's been in and out a little bit, but they're, there's a 35 game sample probably with this group.
Siakam make your all-star team?
Yes.
Give me your 12. Just give me your 12 Eastern Conference All-Stars.
All right, let me grab it here. I have Mitchell, Brown, Tatum, Durant, Embiid.
That's my same starting lineup.
Holiday, Halliburton, Giannis, Bam, Siakam. I have Kyrie just because I should have probably gone by your philosophy.
No, he's been on the court. He's been amazing.
Kyrie and DeRozan.
Fair enough. So Siakam was on it.
Yes.
So the Toronto thing, I don't know what direction they want to go, but I don't think they can look at their team and say the big run is coming. This is a sleeping giant. It doesn't appear that way. So there are two different versions of the Toronto thing. There's the traditional sort of like ho-hum, like Fred VanVleet may not come back here. Let's see what we can get for him instead of losing him for nothing. Gary Trent may not come back here. Let's see what we can get instead of losing him for nothing. And he's been, I think, the hottest, or at least seems to be the most likely Raptor to be moved. Although I think he's playing very well for them. And I think there have been murmurings over the years that he's not thrilled there. I have heard the opposite. I've heard he's okay there, but and then there's the big one, which is moving Anunoby or Siakam. Yeah. Those are two completely different things. The first one, the VanVleet Trent one, is sort of standard team building stuff. The second one is, we no longer believe in the Anunoby Barnes Siakam construction. We're going to sell as high as possible, likely on Anunoby, in which case a lot of teams will register interest, and Toronto will get some good stuff back for OG Anunoby. But those are two different things. My favorite Van Vliet deal that I mentioned before the season was Kyle Lowry back to Toronto, along with a Heat pick, first round pick for Van Vliet. I still like that trade. I don't think the Heat would do it because I think they if we're trading a pick, we're doing it in the Heat mega deal for the next big guy that comes to the Heat. I like that trade. I mean, Fred can go lots of different places. I mentioned the Clippers for him.
Yeah.
You know, the Wolves have a point guard situation that I think is kind of quieted down with D'Angelo Russell. D'Angelo Russell's like kind of had a good year for them, shooting the ball really well. I have not heard a lot of D'Lo stuff anymore. I don't know where the Fred VanVleet journey ends this season. Maybe it just ends in Toronto. I like that Miami trade, but I don't sense a lot of traction on my fake trade.
No, I mean, I had in my fake trade, I had him to the Clippers, you know, just for a package of, you know, I don't know if I were the Clippers, I would consider moving Terrence Mann, you know, like, yeah, it's too much for me. So like, basically like take Covington and whatever you get to the number, and we'll throw in a first round pick and kind of go from there. I think that my concern with, you know, certainly with Fred, 4 for 114, which is his number right now, it's a pretty good number. That's what he's eligible for right now. He's right that he's outplayed his contract. I think he's 19th among all point guards in salary.
19th?
But man, he's played a ton of minutes. Man, he's second behind Harden in the last 4 years in minutes played. I mean, there's a lot of wear and tear here, and he's played pretty good the last few games. I think for me, I would look probably more at OG. I mean, his last 5 games have not been good. I mean, I think he's 37% and 37 from the field, 33%, 11 points here. It's going to be interesting because I think we're going to get some clarification, Zach, as far as from a CBA standpoint. And then hopefully by this time, by the trade deadline comes into play. And I think and I wrote about it today in Wendy's column, one of the things that we might be heading towards is some of these extension rules being tweaked, where like OG as is, basically we're going to hear about his name forever, right? Because he's not going to sign an extension because he's limited for 120%. But if they change the rules where basically it's the percentage of the cap, okay, so it's for him like 30%, then that might change things a little bit here. But I think for him, as you've mentioned before, like he's got the most value, and you've said it, like, you know, what are we looking for? We're looking for a Murray type package from that San Antonio guy, you know, 2 1s, a pick swap, or maybe a first from another team here. And I think if teams have an understanding that these rules are going to change or potentially change, I think that maybe even gives Toronto even a little bit more leverage here.
Yeah, I think I said on a prior podcast in a fit of exuberance that I think the return could like approach Donovan Mitchell levels of return. What I really meant to say, and what I should have said, was in draft equity only. Like there's no marketing coming back in that trade. There's no on-court talent. I just meant draft equity, and I think even that is overstating. I think the Murray one is a better comp because I think Toronto will surely ask for 2 first-round picks, and if multiple teams meet that price, well, then that just sort of leads you to you're going to get something else above that. You know, the other thing I want to say is, again, not every team, but lots of teams have registered interest in OG Anunoby, right? Like he's just the player type that every team wants, a big wing who can shoot threes, although he's not shooting well this season. And he was for a while the defensive player of the year kind of hot name. He's very good defensively. The team that has been other Chris Vernon has been on this for a while is Memphis. And you know, I've been all over Memphis to make a trade, all over them. I mentioned Kuzma. Maybe he's off the table now. Bogdanović would be just absolutely perfect for them. Detroit Bogdanović. I don't think they can get up to the money. I keep hearing that they don't want to trade Danny Green. They love Danny Green's locker room presence. They think he might play for them the rest of the season whenever he comes back. And that's a $10 million chip that is otherwise off the table then. And one thing I said once was, one of the reasons I wanted them to go for just a smaller upgrade like that. Like, what, you don't have to save your chips for like a all NBA level player in 3 years. You're not promised 3 years from now. 3 years from now is promised to nobody in the NBA. You're good enough now to make a run at it. Just upgrade those Roddy Aldama Conchar minutes to like a guy who's really proven. And I really want them to do that. And one of the arguments I made was, well, you're saving your money for this like theoretical superstar X. How are you going to pay that guy, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, and John Morant? And a couple of executives around the league heard that and said, hey, look at their cap sheet. Take a closer look. A lot of this is dependent on what Bane gets. Morant's going to likely get the Supermax.
Yeah.
So his deal is going to go up by X percent compared to what it's projected to be. Bane is going to be a critical negotiation for them. And they have a history of bringing their guys back on good deals.
Yep.
If they get Bane on something closer to 25, then what's Bane's max going to be? 32 or something. It's the same, the hero style thing.
Yeah, 33, somewhere around there.
If they get him back at like 25, just say, hey, we're going to offer you security, like blah, blah, blah. Not the max, but really good. That Jaren Jackson Jr. deal looms as a very critical contract for them. It declines from 29 this year to 27, 25, and 23 in 25, 26. Depending on what happens to the tax, there's a world in which they can actually have Bane, Morant, Jackson, and really good player X and stay under-ish or near the and their owner is making a gazillion badillion dollars every single day. Like it actually may not be untenable for them to have 4-star level players, especially if the fourth guy is an Anunoby level player who's like a top 40, 50 player, but not a top 12 player, and makes the requisite amount of salary. Like that's not out of bounds, the math in math terms. And it wouldn't surprise me if Toronto ever gets to the point of really trying to see what they can get for Anunoby if Memphis actually does kick the tires. That's the one name they've been very hesitant to trade any of their guys, any of their picks. That's the one name. Verno nailed this from the beginning. I could see them looking at.
I mean, they've got everything to offer. I mean, besides, as you mentioned, their own ones, and they've got a Golden State pick, and they've got contracts to do it. And as you said, their cap sheet is clean. They're never a team that goes out as a team with room, right? They're really never, they're kind of a team that just hovers around it. And eventually, like, you've got all these young players on these minimum contract. I mean, on these first round contract. There's a reason why they basically have stockpiled it, right? Like eventually they'll become an expiration date on these players, and then the next wave of players here. And it would be fascinating just because
it's what they did with Melton.
Yeah.
Like as soon as we re-sign Melton for a good number, flip him for a pick.
Yeah. I mean, Contra too, right? I mean, like guys like that, Brandon Clark, Brandon Clark's number is a good number, right? 12 and a half. But we've talked about it, like it would kind of go out of character a little bit because they love to draft, right? We know we love to draft, but I just think we get to a point where we always can't think just because we have Ja and Jaren and we're Desmond Bane, like our window is going to be open forever. Like I think what we saw in the end of the Laker game, the start of Phoenix, and then I know Ja didn't play in Sacramento when they got their doors blown off. I think that has to be a little bit of a wake-up call here.
I like that we got through this whole podcast without mentioning the Shannon Sharpe brouhaha.
Well, the only thing I mentioned about it was when our own Dave McMenamin got him in that back in the interview. I literally had to click on Dave's profile to make sure this was not a hacked account. Like,
I'm not going to say anything else. The Clippers, just to wrap up here, The Clippers are definitely going to do something. You mentioned the Clippers and Van Vliet. I don't know
tell
what
you
the
what, the Dallas game the other night, or what was that, Sunday? Like, that's the team I've been waiting for, man. Right?
Well, but it's every third game they play.
Yeah.
Like the last time they played Dallas was, I thought, was maybe the best they had looked all season, other than the Celtics win, maybe. And then they, three more games happen. Kawhi doesn't play two of them. PG doesn't play the other one. They crap the bed in the middle. It's like, what is this team? I agree with you. That's the team. And they played Covington and Zubats together, which is something they've been hesitant to do. I think that's interesting. I'm not as enamored with that as some of the Clippers blogarati. But I do think they're going to do something. The problem, as you mentioned, is any team with a player worth their while, a player who's really going to change their life, a Van Vliet type, is going to say Terrence Mann in a first round pick. That's where it starts. And they don't want to trade Terrence Mann, and they shouldn't want to trade Terrence Mann. So I think it's going to be like, look, we all know they have a million wings. They're thin at the 1 and they're thin at the 5. I think it's more likely to just be like a small move somewhere at those positions. And that's the end of my Clippers thoughts. I do think they're pretty likely to do something. Is there any team you wanted to hit that we didn't hit? And then I'm going to ask you for your Western Conference 12-team all-star roster.
I think we hit on everything here. I mean, I think, Oklahoma City is fascinating. Like, just because they're in a position where I think they're 1 year away from making a big, let's see if we can get into playing. Let's see how we play, competitive games down a stretch here. And then they're an interesting team like a year from now to talk about, right? From a trade standpoint here, just because they have, like, I love how, like, basically they roll with, Shea, Dort, Santa Clara, Williams, and Giddey. And then basically every game is a rotation at center, right? You got Kenrick Williams, you got Arkansas Jalen Williams, and you've got Mike Muscala, right? And it's like a rotation here. And I think they're kind of a year away from, like, let's talk about, all right, do we get to a point where we start consolidating some of these draft picks in here? But they are, they come after you, man. Like, they compete every night.
Yeah, they're kind of playing with house money. The team I wanted to ask you about is the Kings.
Yeah.
Because Bill Simmons has been on this a lot, that the Kings should make a win now move. They should really go all in on the season. And, I look at their team, and everyone is always fake trading Harrison Barnes everywhere. Harrison Barnes averaging like 16 a game and shooting 40% from 3 and a career high on 2s, I think. And the sweetener, Keegan Murray's not a sweetener. Keegan Murray's good. Keegan Murray's shooting 42% on 3s. He's just a good basketball player. I kind of think the Kings, and I think the argument for making a win now move is the Kings are third. Oh my God, what a story. Are they going to be underdogs in the first round if they're third? They might be. Certainly perception of it will be that they're underdogs. They need to do something. I kind of think the smartest thing for the Kings to do, unless something amazing falls into their lap, is just like, chill. Enjoy what's happening. Do not do anything short-sighted that is going to sacrifice any of your future picks. You already traded one for Herter, great deal. Like, just let the good vibes flow. Maybe you trade a Holmes for a Rashawn Holmes for a couple seconds or whatever you can get, just to declutter the backup center thing. I just kind of, have you heard any Kings buzz?
The only thing I wouldn't be surprised if they take that trade. They have a $4 million trade exception and use that, in a deal here. They've got an open roster spot here and take back something, maybe kind of just like a fringe type move here. And even like, I wrote about a little bit about Terrence Davis here. Like, he's on an expire, and they like him. They like him as far as, his minutes are kind of up and down, but
I'm not sure he's loving his playing time there. He's the name I would look at as an outgoing trade piece.
Yeah. So you basically have 3 trade pieces here. If you don't want to touch your guys, you got Alex Len on an expiring contract. You mentioned Holmes, and you've got Terrence Davis, right? Like, and then you've got this trade exception. That's kind of where you are.
Yeah, dude, I something fringy, fine. I just like don't get too crazy, Kings. Don't get too crazy. All right, wrap up. Give me your Western Conference 12-man All-Star team starters and bench.
All right. So I have Luka, Ja.
Guard. Luka and Ja as the starting guards.
Yep. LeBron, Zion.
As a starter.
Yeah.
Whoa. 836 minutes, Bobby.
I know.
Or nine. No, that's AD. 950
I
minutes.
know.
Fine, sure.
Jokic.
And Jokic.
Yeah.
We actually have two starters that are different, which I think is rare for All-Star.
Curry.
Nope, I have SGA as my second starting guard.
Okay. Booker
off the bench.
Markkanen.
Got to be there.
Sabonis.
He's a starter for me. So
Aaron Gordon.
Okay.
SGA. And Lillard.
So no Fox.
I mean, that's why I asked you before about Lillard. It's like, it's so hard. I mean, who comes off, right?
And again, this is all just,
you know,
there's no point to any of this. Like,
No.
this has no actual impact. My starters are Luka, SGA, LeBron, Sabonis, and Jokic. And I talked with Bill last week about how Markkanen and LeBron was kind of a debate for the last starting front court spot. I think LeBron has settled that debate. It's LeBron James. He starts.
Yeah.
My reserve guards are Ja and Steph Curry. That's easy. My first reserve forward is Markkanen, front court player rather. And after that, it gets a little messy because I don't know what to do with Zion minutes wise. Like, why Zion and no AD? Defend that, Bobby Marks.
Yeah. No, that's fair. That's fair.
Hashtag Lake Show. And then you run into, like, if you don't want Zion or AD because of minutes, you're running out of front court players in the West. It's weird.
Yes.
You don't have a lot of good front court players. So you may be stuck with Aaron Gordon, and then it's like Paul George. Okay. Paul George's having a good year. Like, I wouldn't have any problem with Paul George making the All-Star team. It doesn't feel like he's having a good year, but he is. The guy who really, because they are so strict with positions of guard and front court, is getting squeezed is Anthony Edwards. If I could find a way to slide Anthony Edwards to front court, I think he would have a really strong case. He's been sensational for the last 6 weeks. It's hard to put him over Dame as a guard because that's what he's listed as. And it's hard to put him over Fox as a guard. And I wouldn't mind the Kings getting to. So I'm still debating what to do with the Zions and ADs of the world. And
do you have Booker off here? You don't have Booker?
It's tough, man.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
He's not played a lot, just like these other guys, and he's still out, and he's going to continue to be out. And at some point, you got to draw a threshold of minutes somewhere. I mean, Devin Booker, I had him on my MVP ballot last year. Like, no one needs to come at me about how good Devin Booker is. The guy's amazing. I was a Devin Booker fan in like 2017. I wrote a piece about how good Devin Booker was going to be. Anyway, Bobby Marks, it's going to be a busy couple weeks. Am I going to see you in Los Angeles for trade deadline
Bristol? Bristol. I'll save you a couple cookies from the cafe.
The Hilton DoubleTree cookies, baby.
That's right.
All right, Bobby Marks. What do we got? We have 2 trade guides out that came out late last week, I think. Right.
We've got both trade guides. We've got
so you can print those babies out or save some trees and don't print them out, but sit down in front of your laptop for quite a while and read those. What else?
Or read them on your phone. And then in Brian Windhorst's column today that he has on Mike Brown, we have some extension stuff regarding the next CBA. And I would think in the next few weeks, we'll probably hear more about some more CBA stuff.
Bobby Marks, essential. Thank you for your time, and I will see you soon, my friend.
Thank you.